Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project Copyright Edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. A missing person segment with a little bit of a twist today. Gotta change it up every once in a while. But I know some of you don't like to read, but I'm telling you, you need to read that book. I've already had some really close personal friends read it and say, Dave, it's your best. There's some stories in here that are very strange, and you can buy the book and the hat at a discounted price if you buy them together on our website, NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store. And yeah, my buddy Harvey Pratt did the logo for us on the front, the eagle. Love that guy. So, as I do my research, I run across articles occasionally that are very strange. So just recently I cut out a couple. I'm going to read them to you. This comes from the Sheffield Weekly, July 20th, 1891. Dateline Pittsburgh, July 17th, 1891. A series of accidents happened at Rankin Station near Braddock, PA. Braddock is a very small suburb of Pittsburgh, kind of southeast, not very far, whereby 5 persons living in the same building lost their lives. Yesterday morning, David Bell, age 29, employed at the Kerry Furnace and a boarder at the house of Charles McGrattan, left for his work in the morning. He did not return for supper, and at 7 o'clock last evening, his naked body was found floating in the Monongahela River. He had been drinking hard as of late, and it is not known whether he was accidentally drowned while swimming or committed suicide. 2 hours later, 2 hours, a lamp exploded in the McGrattan's dwelling, and 2 of his children, aged 7 and 10, who were sleeping at the time, were burned up in the house. This morning, about daylight, Harry Rowe and Peter Nee, who boarded with McGrattan, went to the house to look for effects in the rummage. While searching in the debris, a brick chimney fell on them, almost instantly killing Rowe and fatally injuring Nee, who died about 10 o'clock. The men were 30 years of age and single. Another fatality may result from the series of remarkable accidents at Rankin Station. Dr. Cope, who was called to dress the wounds of Peter Nee, was driving home this morning when his horse ran away and wrecked the vehicle. The doctor was thrown out and injured so badly that he may die as well. The accidents have created intense excitement in the vicinity, and a large crowd surrounds the ruins. Wow. I know some of you say, well, you know, coincidences happen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all in one building? Really? After I read this, I thought, well, if I owned that property, I would have a priest come over and bless it. And then I'd have a Native American come over and sage it. I'd do everything, because that's I've never read something quite like that. Yeah, strange. So this is December 19th, 1913. The East Prairie Eagle. Title, Killed by a Varmint. Near Kewanee, Wisconsin last week, 2 men were coon hunting and were cutting a tree when one of the men accidentally cut his foot very badly. The wound was painful, and he sat down at the foot of the tree until the other man finished cutting that tree, after which he expected to be taken home by his comrade. By the time the tree was cut, the wounded man was so weak from the loss of blood that he was unable to travel, and the other man was dispatched for a horse. When help finally arrived, the body of the wounded man was found torn to pieces and partially eaten. It is not known what kind of an animal attacked the man. The two men were from some other neighborhood, and our correspondent failed to learn their names. This happened on the bayou a little north of this place. And the date line was Kewanee. Wow. I haven't read too many of those. And usually people know what sort of dangerous animals are in their area, and usually are be able to identify the wounds and tracks around. To not know, that's pretty weird, I'd say the least. So let's get on with the stories. The first story, I had several of you write to me about it. And I'm a pretty cautious guy. I usually don't like to, Huck's out there. When she's in here, she wants to be out there. When she's out there, she wants to be in here. If she barks again, I'll let her in. So I usually am very cautious when it comes to missing person cases. I'll wait and let the story kind of vet itself out, see if they're found, if they're not found, thoughts of search and rescue, blah, 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 see if they just ran away and going to return. Kind of waited that way on this one. It's a strange case. Involves a woman named Samantha Murphy. This is Samantha, 51 years old, disappeared February 5th of this year, 2024, at 7 a.m. from Ballarat, Australia. So Ballarat is just west of Melbourne. Here's Melbourne. Here's Melbourne. Wilson's Promontory. Ballarat, right there. The reason I highlighted this is this area in here has a lot of very strange disappearances. The strangest disappearance related to a UFO I've ever documented in my life, I did it for a video for you guys, was right here. Ballarat. Melbourne. Well, Samantha had 3 kids. She was married. Everyone lived in the house. Everyone was happy. The family owned a car repair business in town. They lived on the far east side of town. They lived on the southeast side of Ballarat in a very rural area. Samantha was a woman who stayed in very good shape. Every day, she ran 14 to 17 kilometers. That's a good run. Now, to give you a feeling of the size of the town, there's 116,000 in the city. Good size. But in Australia, once you get to the outskirts of the city, it gets rural very quick. She left her home, told her husband she was leaving at 7 a.m., and she usually ran towards the Canadian forest. That's the name of these woods near there, even though it's in Australia. And then south towards Mount Helen. She did it every day. Nothing unusual. Routine. So this is the town of Ballarat right here. She ran towards this Canadian plantation area. They called it the Canadian Forest. Down along Geelong Road, Mount Helen. And then she ended up in this area right here. And I'll talk about that in a second. This area is rural, not a lot of people at all. Well, at noon, she hadn't come home. Her husband, Michael, gets in his car and drives the route that Samantha would have normally ran. Comes back, calls the police right away. Police interview the family, interview Michael, pulled out a map, explained the route. Police take a report and then take off, and they're going to drive the route that she would have ran. And then they called in other units. And then any possible side routes she might have taken, they took those too. Well, the police decided that the next day would be a full search and rescue call out. And they brought in canine units. Mounted team went off trail looking. When you're on a mounted unit on a horse, you're sitting up high, so you have a pretty good view of what's below you. So going off trail. And the air wing, they put a plane up, and when they were looking for anything unusual, see if they could get a hit on a FLIR, some warm body. Now, the weather that day was starting to get warm. The next day even got more warm, very, very hot. And the police decided to walk the street, the entire route that she would have ran, knock on doors, and see if they could come up with CCTV footage, maybe a confrontation between her and somebody, her entering a house, something unusual. Well, they found some footage of what appeared to be a runner running in the right direction that she would have been running. And they ran with that for a little while. Oh, we got her on film now, fine. Then a couple days later, a woman saw the footage and said, no, that was me. So they had no footage of her. Now, that area at the far south end of the map was called Buninyong, and that was the last place where they could ping her phone. All of her family, friends said that her disappearance was totally out of character. And the police stated that it was getting highly suspicious to them because there was no evidence of anything. Usually if somebody gets attacked by an animal, let's say, the clothing's ripped, pieces behind, people hear a scream somewhere, nothing. And that was suspicious to them. Now let me say something about routine. There's a lot of bad people in our world. Just the reality of it. And they like to follow people with routine. Men, you're a little different, but I'll talk to the ladies out there. If you leave on a run every morning at a certain time, and there's somebody in that neighborhood who's a bad person, well, they know where to look for you every morning at a certain time. Because let's say at 7 o'clock they leave their home, at 7:15 they're at this intersection, at 7:30 they're next to this rural area. That's the way it is, folks. When you do routine things, you open yourself up for violence and bad things. Now, I don't know what happened on this case, but then I read this. February 11th, 2023. Almost exactly a year earlier than when Samantha disappeared, there was a Senate candidate named Sissy Austin. She was also a runner. And she was running in the same general area where Samantha was headed. And Sissy was running along a trail. She never saw who hit her, but somebody hit her over the head and knocked her out. She doesn't know how long she was knocked out, but she woke up and she managed to get back to her car and call police. She wasn't assaulted, nothing else, but that attack happened in the same area where Samantha disappeared. I find that suspicious because in this area there's not a lot of crime. And the first case was Sissy, lone female running, rural trail, attacked. Exact same instance as with Samantha, but we don't know what happened to her. Canines didn't pick up a scent. I'm going to say that if I was her family, I'd be very worried. And I would pick every piece of CCTV footage, and I wouldn't be just looking for Samantha. I'd be looking for every car that went through that frame between, say, 7:30 and noon. Every car, and I'd be trying to find the owner. Because if that person didn't arrive in a car, then they live in a house in that area. Choice number 2, run every home along that street and see if there's a sexual predator living in it. That'd be my path. And that's a lot of work, I realize. But I've been on some task forces where when you have a big case like that, you don't care how much work it is. You just do it. I mean, you're working for a family, daughters, sons, uncles, aunts. You're working for everybody. You got to do it. I realize some people don't have that kind of get up and go, but they shouldn't be working on a case like this if they don't. So Samantha still hasn't been found. Weird case. Next case. See if you can see the similarities between this next case and Samantha's case. Happened a long ways away from Samantha. Man's name, Curtis Berry. Here's a recent picture of Curtis. Missing July 19th, 2010. Out of Bradford, Ontario. Lived on a street called Britannia Avenue. Every morning, he'd leave his home and take his 2 dogs on a walk. He lived in his home with his wife, Michelle. Now, he had 2 dogs. He has an older dog named, it was a collie, and he had a German Shepherd. Both of them liked to walk, went on the same route every day, same time. Curtis was described in good shape, no medical issues. Bradford, a very safe area. And they lived on the eastern edge of Bradford, and that's where his walk was centered. Now, Bradford is one of the most interesting cities to me for its location. Great Lake, Lake Simcoe. And there's where this happened, right here. Right in the middle of major bodies of water. All kinds of disappearances along this shoreline that I've documented. This is the US-Canadian border, US here, Canada here. Curtis left his home at 8 a.m. Michelle stated that the morning was completely normal. Nothing was unusual. Dogs were fine. Curtis was fine. Weather was good. By 4 o'clock, Curtis hadn't returned. And his wife calls the Bradford police. So they come over to the house, just like Australia. Sit down, take a report, get some pictures, get out a map, show me the area that he would go. Was he with somebody? Did he ever talk to anybody along the route? Did he have friends along the route? Was he in a bad mood? Was he suicidal? Was he happy? What pace would he have taken? How long would the route have taken for him to be back? Etc., etc. So the police that day get 5 officers, and they comb the area of the walk. Now this area is wet, rural, swampy, marshy, yucky. But there was a trail that went through the middle of it. It was a well done trail. A lot of people walked it. Well, July 20th, the next day, Bradford calls for a full search and rescue call out. The Canadians send a helicopter with FLIR, multiple canines, units, and a boat search the West Holland River. Gotta remember something, folks. I know your mind says, well, maybe he fell in the river. Maybe. Maybe. But how many times has this man walked that route? Hundreds. And then suddenly something happens? Completely out of the normal, unprovoked? Well, again, on that day following the disappearance, Michelle gets a call from animal control. And they stated that her German Shepherd was picked up at 11 a.m. the day before, 1 kilometer off that walking route that Curtis was taking. Dog was fine, nothing unusual. They didn't say if the dog still had the leash on. They didn't say anything. but she went and she got the dog. Now, the 21st through the 24th of July, there were huge searches conducted in this area. There was no rational reason for this disappearance. Totally out of character. July 26th. The older collie had been picked up by a couple on July 19th, the day of the disappearance, at 11 a.m., the same time as the German Shepherd, at a place called Deset and Bridge. The couple said that they picked up the dog. The next day they went on vacation. They came back from vacation. They saw all this commotion and thought, well, this dog must belong to the Berries. So they called the police and turned the dog back over to the wife. Again, no other details on the dog. Would have only been gone from the home for 3 hours. Would have been probably the time that Curtis was getting back from his walk. Maybe a little too late, but about that time. Again, search and rescue continues. More helicopters, more canines, more cadaver dogs. Witnesses were searched for all along the route. People who lived. Did you see anything? Did you see the man? Nothing. July 29th, search and rescue is finally suspended. Police had stated that they had searched in areas up to their chest in the swamp. They said some areas a helicopter searched very low, looking for bodies in the water, etc. Nothing. Now let me stop you here for a second. Only a couple things can happen here, folks. Man loves his dogs. Every day he goes out with the dogs and walks them. Is it rational to think that the man would just let the dogs go and run off and leave? I don't think that's what a dog owner does. You love your dogs, you love your dogs. Now maybe that day, if he wanted to run away, tell his wife, hey, I'm going to take a walk today. I just got to clear my head. I don't want to take the dogs. I'll be back in a bit. Then he walks away and he doesn't come back. I understand that one. Not with the dogs. Now, there's not a lot of crime in Bradford. But even if there was crime, criminals usually don't go to the point of driving a body away from the scene. If they're going to kill somebody, they kill them on the spot and dump them in the water, and that's the end of it. But there was no evidence of any crime, police stated. There's a lot of unusualness and parallels between the Murphy case and the Berry case. The main difference is one's a man, one's a woman. A woman is not going to kidnap a man the way a man may want to kidnap a woman. And in Murphy's situation, just a year earlier, something very violent happened to another lady that was jogging. But because I've told you before that all these things happen around swamps and water, I find it highly suspicious that Curtis was never found. Never. Now, his wife said he was in good shape. No medical issues. It's interesting to me. Well, on July 31st, there was an all-volunteer search and rescue. The press covered it and said, family said it was an emotional roller coaster for them. They had nothing made sense. On April 3rd, the following year, there was a new search and rescue with 4 golden retrievers who were cadaver dogs. If any body was within several miles, the dog would pick it up. They picked up nothing. And then I also searched forward years too, seeing if there's any news, a suspect arrested, a new theory behind what happened. 7 years after Curtis disappeared, on July 27, 2017, there was a follow-up article titled 7 Years Later. Nothing new. How is this possible? He left everything behind. How can the family get closure on this? How could anybody get closure on this? When you know you have somebody who's tied to his family, tied to his house, tied to his animals. I'm sorry. This wasn't a voluntary disappearance. No way. And I know that's a radical stance for me to take, but based on profiling meaning you look at the person and you add up all of the qualities that make that person. And then you face those profile points against the profile points over here of people who have disappeared. And what do they line up against? In Curtis's case, he wouldn't have walked away. In Samantha's case, I guarantee she didn't walk away. She had young girls, family, husband, ran a business. No, she didn't run away. My guess is that Samantha will be found sooner or later. My guess is Curtis, no, he will never be found. And never be found probably for a variety of reasons. If a body's in a swamp and it's decayed and it's just bones, the bones are at the bottom of the swamp, nobody will ever find him. If he's there. Then again, we know the number of times that somebody disappears in an area and they're found in another area at another point in time. But I presented these cases for two reasons. First one, both of them wholesome family people. Love their families. Number two, they left alone, meaning they weren't with other people. Point of separation. Samantha said goodbye to her husband. Curtis said goodbye to his wife. They walked out the door, something happened. We don't know what. We don't know when. Just the facts. I appreciate you being here, and I would appreciate it if you shared these stories. I do try to find stories from all over the world, and Australia has many cases that mimic ours, and they have a lot of UFO sightings in Australia. Just a fact. In the meantime, be nice to your friends and neighbors. Go to our website, NA, like North America, Bigfoot Search.com. Go to the online store. I've got a lot of accolades for the hat. It's a great hat. Paulides out.